Killian, I'll be back.
Only in a rerun.
The Running Man was released in 1987 and was a box office success. On the DVD commentary, the producer revealed it cost around $30 million to make, and made around $18 million in the USA, and I imagine it did well worldwide. The plot revolves around a man who is wrongly convicted and is thrown into a game show in which he has to survive a public execution. It got trashed by film critics and was given an award for the most violent film of the year. Looking at it now, it's quite tame by today's standards. The film was very popular with the general public, with Arnold Schwarzenegger gaining popularity as a movie star. 1987 was a good year for him. With the huge success of Predator, Arnie was on the road to becoming a huge action star. The producer Rob Cohen, who later went on to direct films such as Dragging the Bruce Lee Story and The Fast and the Furious, purchased the rights to the novel. The book was written by Stephen King under a different name, Richard Bachman. The final draft of the script was penned by Stephen E. D'Souza, who went on to direct the disastrous Street Fighter the movie. The film is loosely based on the novel and many changes were made. The book took place in 2025, whereas the film is set in 2019. The character of Richard, played by Arnie, his backstory is a lot different to the novel. Originally, in the novel he entered the show to win prize money for his ailing infant. The book was a lot darker and realistic, but they changed it to be more theatrical and a bit more cyberpunk in its design. Stephen D'Souza only takes a few key elements from the novel and turns it into a typical Hollywood action flick, and adds a lot more of his trademark tongue-in-cheek humour. When the film was in pre-production, a couple of actors had shown signs of interest in playing the lead role, such as Patrick Swayze, Dolph Lundgren and Christopher Reeve. Chris, I believe, was involved for a short period of time before he dropped out to star in Street Smart and Superman 4, due to being offered a deal he couldn't refuse by Cannon Studios. The final film very much plays to Arnie's strengths as an actor. It would have been a very different film altogether, I think, if Christopher Reeve was still attached. Prior to the director Paul Michael Glaser being involved, Rob Cohen had hired a few other directors in his attempt to make the movie. The first choice was George P. Cosmatos, who later went on to direct Leviathan and Tombstone. Rob Cohen was very impressed with his work on Rambo First Blood Part 2. However, when George announced he wanted to relocate the entire film to a shopping mall, Cohen let him go, feeling the director was taking the script in an unacceptable direction. Andrew Davis, the director of films such as The Fugitive and Under Siege, was offered the job after impressing Cohen with his film Code of Silence. Davis actually got the project off the ground and into production, but only 8 days into the shoot he was already $8 million over budget and 4 days behind schedule. Davis had shot half the first sequence of the film at the steel mill and was taking too long setting up his shots. As such, Cohen let him go and ultimately hired Paul Glaser, whom he had worked with on the first season of Miami Vice. Paul Glaser rose to fame as Starsky from Starsky and Hutch, and went on to direct many TV shows. The first scenes Paul shot were at the airport. The director had no choice on what locations he could use. Everything was already decided before he jumped onto the production. His job was just to get the film finished on time. The filmmakers made some interesting choices with their casting. Richard Dawson portrays the egotistical game show host, Damien Killian, whom many say was a mirror image of himself at one time or another. During his real-life career, he hosted many game shows, such as Family Feuds.
Ice cream.
Turn around. You're good.
Thank you.
Jaguar, roaming wild, wildcat. You said? Ma. Survey said? 2.
Oh.
Cougar. Number 1 answer, yeah. Something associated with bunnies. You said tail. Survey said 10.
Jesse Ventura, who also stars in Predator with Arnie, plays Captain Freedom. His character is great. All his dialogue seems to have been lifted from a wrestling speech. The delivery of his lines is so over the top, it becomes a joy every time he's on camera.
Forget it, Killian. I won't do it.
It's not a request, moron. It's an order.
I don't need this crap. This stuff is garbage. I was killing guys like this 10 years ago with my bare hands. I'm not going for any of these tricks. This is a sport of death and honor. Code of the gladiators. Are you ready for pain? Are you ready for suffering? If the answer is yes, then you're ready for Captain Freedom's workout.
Yes, it's America's own.
When you hear the tone, control your jealousy and leave your message.
The other gladiators in the film are a mixed bunch. The character Dynamo, who was also an opera singer and performs a few numbers in the film, actually passed away shortly after the film was released. He was only in his mid-30s and suffered a fatal heart attack. The soundtrack by Harold Faltermeyer is fantastic. Instead of having a classical score, they went with an electronic one, and it works perfectly. They made the perfect choice with going with Faltermeyer. He rose to fame with his work on Beverly Hills Cop and Top Gun. He recently composed a score to Kevin Smith's Cop Out. But to be honest, the soundtrack was the only good thing to come out of that film. There was a limited edition release of the soundtrack a few years back, but I can imagine it will set you back quite a bit on eBay. The film unfortunately wasn't well received by critics. Many thought it was overly violent and didn't find the action scenes very exciting. Siskel and Ebert gave the film the thumbs down.
Our next film is called The Running Man, and the man on the run in this film for his life is Arnold Schwarzenegger. The film is set in the 21st century, and Schwarzenegger, a former cop with a rebel past, finds himself a participant in the sickest part of this new totalitarian state. It's always lousy in the future in the movies. I guess that is an effort to make us feel good about paying, the $5 or $6 to see the film today, where it's so much fun. At any rate, in this future society, there is a violent game show where criminals are forced to run for their lives against powerful warriors who always make their kill. Schwarzenegger is eventually forced to compete, of course. The game show host is Richard Dawson from TV's Family Feud.
On your marks! Get set! Killian, I'll be back. Guess they want us to stay.
The romantic angle in the film involves Maria Conchita Alonso as a worker for the TV network who gets into her own fight for life after unknowingly helping Arnold.
You think I'm helping you out? Do they even think I'm your girlfriend?
You can straighten that out. See this camera up there? I can strangle you for the home audience.
Yes, there certainly is a lot of action in this film, but it is redundant and turned me off. I mean, once you go down the tube, that's kind of neat, especially the way that makes the turn, but then over and over, it got a little boring. The killers are not all that spectacular, and this surprised me, particularly former football player turned actor Jim Brown. He's really boring as Fireball, a guy with a flamethrower, and that's all he's got. A flamethrower, some spray paint in his hair. And yes, I'm afraid I'm getting tired even now of Arnold Schwarzenegger with his cute throwaway lines during unending fights. I was not excited by The Running Man.
I wasn't excited either. I agree with you that the villains were not really set up into really interesting individual characters, but they were just kind of like, targets in an arcade game.
Yeah.
There is one element of this film that is excellent, and that is the entire backstage detail of the game show is hosted by Richard Dawson. And his performance is fascinating. He seems about half-crocked all the time, always smoking that king-size cigarette, talking about his ratings. He's playing with human lives, and all he really cares about is the adulation of those faceless masses who cheer him on. And I think that performance, if you took it out of the movie and just looked at it individually, is as interesting in its way as an indictment of television as Network was.
Well, I think that he is good in the film. Very well cast. He always had that sort of sinister side to him. Even when he kissed the ladies, we knew that he was sort of a little bit strange, or at least he knew he was being very manipulative. And so he is well cast, but the film does not work.
During the late 80s, many movies were getting released as video games for the 8-bit computers. During this period, studios weren't too strict on game publishers on how the game should turn out. It was just another form of revenue for them. Robocop and Batman were a huge success on the home computers. A video game was released for The Running Man on the Amstrad, Spectrum and Commodore 64, but as you can see from the graphics and gameplay, it doesn't look very exciting. The Running Man has aged quite well thanks to its subject matter. Dealing with reality shows at the time and how they affect people's lives and how they can manipulate people is very interesting. And today there are many shows that are designed in a similar fashion for entertainment. The news today doesn't seem as subjective as it once was. It seems very much aimed to entertain people 24/7, which is very worrying. We have all seen how the media twists the truth to make us think in one direction with a basis to gain control over us. With the film starting with a prologue describing the collapse of the economy in 2015, the way things are going, especially in Europe, with many countries suffering from extreme debt, this can easily happen. But I don't think there will be any sort of Running Man TV show in the next few years. The film obviously still resonates with its fans because it's still an entertaining flick. Watching it again, it does feel more like a TV movie because it looks pretty cheap and many of the shots are always close-ups to hide the fact that the film was on a small budget. The film was often on over the weekends when I was growing up, and I always got this film mixed up with Total Recall. I think down to both films using a lot of red in their visual design. I don't think this is one of Arnie's best flicks. It's certainly not bad, and entertains people with its cheesy one-liners and violence. But for someone who hasn't seen any of his films, I would certainly recommend one of his other hits before viewing this film.